Welcome, everybody. We're really excited to introduce Mark Gainey today at our Innovation Fund Bootcamp as one of our Fireside chat speakers. He is the co-founder and executive chairman at Strava. He attended and graduated from Harvard College and has been building successful companies for over 20 years now. Strava itself is an internet service for tracking sports analytics as well as a social media network, and is often used for, but not limited to, endurance sports such as running, cycling, and rowing. Since Mark co-founded Strava in 2009, millions of athletes around the world have joined the service for the competition and camaraderie found in tracking and sharing their fitness activities. Mark, welcome. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Jack. Yeah, great to be here. Sorry to be ruining everybody's Friday night. Geez, what is the worst place. So we'll try to keep it fun.
All right. Well, the structure of the call is going to be the first 30 minutes is going to be a structured Q&A where I'm going to be asking Mark a series of questions. And then the second half will be open audience Q&A. So at that time, if you'd like to ask a question, just raise your hand and we'll call on you. All right, let's kick things off. Just starting off, Mark, how did you first decide you wanted to become an entrepreneur, and how did you get the idea for Strava?
Yeah, so we're going to go back to the last century. I'm sure probably half of you weren't even born, but as Jack mentioned, so I was at the college from 86 to 1990, graduated in 90 with a degree in fine arts. So art history major, but the other thing that I did there was spend a lot of time in the boathouse. So I was a lightweight rower. So that's important for two reasons. One, it's where I met my business partner, my co-founder, Michael Horvath. We were on the team together. He was class of 88. And so we've had a friendship now that goes on, 30 plus years. We've done two businesses together. But it's also, frankly, where the kernel of the idea for Strava, where it actually came from. Because the problem that happened for us, we had this great experience in that boathouse for 4 years, and then we graduated and, poof, it disappeared. This whole opportunity to be on a team and enjoy the competition and the camaraderie and the esprit de corps and the trash talking and kind of everything that just comes from participating in a team sport like that was perfect at the boathouse. But when we graduated and all of a sudden I was out in the workforce, I went to go work for a venture firm out in Palo Alto, California. It just wasn't the same. I mean, I was running and riding and trying to be fit, but we just really missed the team. So as early as 1995, Jack, we had a business plan. It wasn't called Strava. It was called Kana Sports Network, but it was a business plan that was basically, let's use the internet to create a virtual locker room. Let's figure out a way to bring all of our buddies back together in one place so that we can kind of share our adventures and our workouts and compete with each other. The only problem was we were a little early with the idea. So I won't bore you with all the things that happened, but we ended up doing a different business, and we were very fortunate. It was a great ride. That's really where I enjoyed entrepreneurship. And then you have to fast forward to 2008, 2009, when we realized that the world had changed and the opportunity to create Strava was much more relevant.
And when you actually got to founding Strava in 2009, what was the journey of creating Strava like, and promoting it and getting users? What was that whole process like?
Yeah, so working backwards, if you think of Strava today, it's pretty fascinating. I mean, we've got 70 million athletes worldwide. We add 2 million athletes every month. We're in 195 countries. You can do 30 different sports on Strava, everything from running and biking, which are kind of the core sports, to frankly, hiking on a Sunday or kiteboarding or climbing Everest. They can all be posted to Strava. But when we started, the roots of it were very different. We really focused in on one core audience, which was the passionate road cyclist. Ironically, Michael and I are not that. While we enjoyed riding our bikes and things, we're not that audience. But we saw that there was a niche in the market. There were a whole bunch of other apps out there that were tracking running and so forth. But the cyclists were unique in that they were totally addicted to the data. They were already investing heavily in their sport. And we had this strategy that we'd applied in our previous company, which was called, look, go an inch wide and a mile deep when you're trying to start a business. And really what that meant was, let's just go be really authentic. Let's be very focused on one audience, even if the audience looks too small. Oftentimes as an entrepreneur, I'll get accused of going after a niche market or the addressable market's not big enough. But I think sometimes what investors miss in that is that by having that niche audience and being very focused on them, we just created this loyalty and this almost sort of fanaticism amongst that group because we were creating very specifically for them. And what happens when you do that is we then began to build both a confidence in our product as well as just sort of a platform from which we could expand. And so, Jack, to answer your question, after 3 or 4 years and really starting to dominate the cycling world online, then we were confident that we could launch in running. We launched in mobile. We launched in 14 different languages and began sort of the expansion process. But it was only after we felt like we had a really solid foundation with that first audience.
And in those first few years, did you have any challenges that were sort of difficult to face? Do you remember anything in particular from along that path?
Oh yeah, no, we spend the whole hour on all the mistakes that you make, and you learn pretty quickly how to. Michael and I often describe sort of the sine wave. I don't know if all of you, if you've started your entrepreneurial journeys already, but the highs and the lows can often happen within even a given hour, right? One phone conversation comes in, and it's like, oh my gosh, somebody's going to invest in us. This is wonderful. And then the next call you get, the software's broken down and nobody can even access the service. I'll give you examples. Who would have thought that, a year and a half into our existence, we would have a wrongful death lawsuit on our hands? You don't predict that when you're an entrepreneur, but that was something we had to deal with. By the way, it was thrown out. The suit was thrown out. We did not lose that. But you learn a lot about the fact that, when you're offering something to consumers, you need to be really focused on making sure that what you're offering is being used for its intended use, things like that. We learned a lot about that authenticity. As I mentioned to you, going from cycling to running, we had this theory that we could take largely the experience we had for cyclists, kind of repaint it for the runner and offer it to them. Was not the case. Like, it was a very different experience we had to go create for runners, which meant we had to actually go and hire differently. We had to bring a running community inside Strava to really begin to think about the DNA of a runner's mindset and what they needed. So that took us longer than we anticipated. Shifting to mobile. Strava wasn't mobile when we first launched. Strava was a website that you could connect a Garmin cycling computer to do. You basically plug it into the back of the computer. We made it exceptionally hard to join Strava. But once the mobile phones began to show battery life that could actually be significant enough to take out on a ride, as well as having GPS chipsets that were of high quality enough that you actually had good data, we were pretty quick to make that transition. The only problem was, and I could bore you for hours, we thought people would still love to go to our website. So our first mobile app was really around track your ride and then come and enjoy the website. But as we all know, you never leave your phone. You go, you track, and then you want to keep doing all the wonderful things that Strava offers right there in the app. So it took us probably a good 2 to 3 years before we had a truly robust mobile app that was on par with what you can see on the web today. So those are just little examples, but I could go on forever. It's just, the thing I would tell all of you is, like, flatten the sine wave. You have highs, you have lows. It's all about how you respond to them. If you respond too quickly to the high and then too low, you're just going to be on this journey that drives you nuts. But if you can kind of just appreciate that it's the way you respond to this stuff, don't get too high, don't get too low. It's all part of the journey. The next day will be better. You just persist and it works.
Awesome. Kind of on the flip side, what are some of your most enjoyable or rewarding memories from along that founding path of Strava? Any particular highs in the sine wave that you remember?
Yeah, no, there's been plenty of those along the way. I'll start with just the great thing about being in the consumer business. And I got to go back. So our previous company that Michael and I did, when we realized we couldn't launch the original Strava idea, we ended up in the middle of enterprise software. And basically helping companies answer customer email. You have to go back to 1995, 1996. This is when people were just building their first websites, companies. And so we were in a business that was all about selling to other businesses, helping them manage customer email in high volumes, really exciting business, but it was selling to enterprises. It was selling to the likes of everybody from a Yahoo to a Chase Manhattan Bank to a Ford Motor Company. When we started doing consumer, where now you're really dealing with our friends and our relatives and everybody around us, the highs start to be when you're actually impacting their life. And again, I could spend a whole other hour, and the stories we get on a weekly basis that come into Strava around We have babies that have been named after Strava in Canada. We have had marriage proposals. I don't know if you've ever heard of Strava art, but people go out and they'll go on these long rides or runs, and they'll use their run to basically write something. So they'll write, please marry me, Beth, or the one that just happened 2 days ago in San Francisco. The woman ran 26.2 miles because she couldn't do the Chicago Marathon, but she basically ran the word vote 2020, right? It's just really great to see the way in which people inspire others. We get stories around what's happened to people's health all the time. Had a great one come in just a few years ago where a gentleman feeling great, having fun on Strava with his friends, beating them up all what we call the Strava segments and so forth, which is just a way to compete inside Strava. But his heart rate data inside Strava was always a little bit higher than all of his buddies. And it drove him nuts. He felt like he was the one who was in the best shape. So why was his heart rate higher? And a long story short, he ended up at a cardiologist who explained to him that he had what was called a widowmaker. He had a problem with his heart. He was asymptomatic, so he didn't feel it, but he required a triple bypass. And he wrote into us because he said, if Strava hadn't been sending me the signal, I never would have known. I felt totally fine, and yet this was going to kill me at some point. So we get those stories all the time. And that to me is really powerful, to know that we're doing something good out there. We may not be curing cancer, but we have a fundamental belief that if you're active, good things happen. Not only for your own physical health and your mental well-being, but you're going to be a better student. You're going to be a better parent. You're going to be a better coworker. You're going to be a better friend. When you're physically active, good things happen. And we see a lot of that now in Strava.
Awesome. In terms of the work culture at Strava, what was it like to work sort of in the early days, and what is it like to work on it now? Have you tried to preserve a certain kind of culture there? I know the team's probably a lot bigger nowadays, but what's it like been working there sort of through the years?
Yeah. So we're not huge. We're 200 people today. So depending on your definition, it's 200 is just big enough that you don't quite know everybody by name, and particularly in this world that we live in now, where we're all doing this by Zoom and remote. I think we've added 30 people just in the time that COVID's been here. So, that's been difficult, but we're adjusting. I'd say the big difference, when you're early and you can all sit around the same table, boy, you can make decisions fast. You can iterate quickly. I mean, you have serious advantages as a small team, and take advantage of those because they do get harder with time. I mean, there's a fair bit of process. There's a fair bit of decision making now requires. We try to be really careful with both how to be collaborative, yet how to make sure we get decisions made quickly. Who's the decision maker versus who's just maybe consulting on something. So there's been some changes that way, but I think the good news, Jack, from a culture standpoint, what happens in any company is there's going to be a culture that develops whether you like it or not. Like, it's going to happen. And what we did at Strava was, about 2 years in, we sat down with a group of us because we realized that it was happening, and we should document it. We should decide what kind of culture we're going to be at Strava, and then start to live to those values. And we did that. We came up with something we call the Strava ABCs. So the reason there's ABCs is that there's an A, a B, and there's 3 Cs: authenticity, balance, and then craftsmanship, camaraderie, and commitment. And those are the 5 words that we live by. And we often joke that there are no sacred cows at Strava. We are prepared to change anything at any time if we think we can do it better, with one exception, and that is the ABCs. And we believe that so strongly that we actually put them on a coin. And when you join Strava, you get a silver coin, and on the front side it says Strava. On the back side, it's got the A, the B, and the 3 Cs. And we actually hammer those every week. All hands meeting, we'll talk about one of them. We'll talk about what it means to be balanced in COVID, or we'll talk about authenticity. But that's been a core part of our DNA from day one. So I would say I shouldn't say day one, but we've articulated it after a few years, and now it's sort of inculcated into the culture. And then the last thing I'll bring up that's kind of obvious, but you have to believe in the mission, right? We believe that by keeping people active, good things happen, and we can help you achieve your personal best, whatever that is. And so because of that, you're going to come and join Strava because you believe in that. You don't have to be an athlete by any stretch. There's plenty of people who have hobbies that are not running or riding. But I would venture to guess that even if you aren't, when you join, over time, you kind of get sucked into it. And so, the culture at Strava is, pre-COVID, there was a lot of sweaty shoes that were hanging around. We have a locker room that's bigger than most people's offices. We have a bike room that's sizable because that's how everybody came to work. And it's one of the great things, if you enjoy that stuff, then that's the kind of culture you want to build.
Fantastic. In terms of your responsibilities day to day as executive chairman, what does that look like? Has that been impacted greatly by COVID at all? Just give us a little insight into that. That'd be great.
Yeah, no, it's so I've played many roles in the years. I served as CEO about half the time, and then my partner Michael's the other half, and he's actually running it right now. And so executive chair is sort of this funny title in that I'm kind of his right hand in many respects. So I don't have direct reports. In some ways, my primary responsibility is the board, and to ensure that we have really good connection or sort of collaboration between the board of directors and the management team. So if I have one responsibility, that would be the key one. But the piece about the executive part of it is important because I sit in on all of our management team meetings. I sit in on all the leadership meetings. I was running late to this meeting, and I apologize to everybody. I was running late because we were in the middle of, having a board discussion around, just things like future financing and so forth. So I would say that I am very fortunate because I get to be involved in a company that I clearly am passionate about and we're having fun doing. But I also my weeks are never the same. Like there are weeks when I get to go out in the field and spend time with our members and go on runs with them or rides. Although I'm a little stuck right now, but when I'm not getting injured and having surgeries, then I'm out having fun with our members. And then there's other times when I'm knee deep in product planning or financing strategy or recruiting. We're actually recruiting a new board member right now, so in the middle of trying to do that. So it's that's kind of the perks of being a founder and playing the role I do.
Great. You spoke a bit to Strava's past and how it's developed from being sort of like cycling focused to now including a variety of sports. As much as you're allowed to tell us, what does the future hold for Strava? Where do you see the company going maybe over the course of the next decade or so? Yeah,
it's fun. We've been around now 11 years, and yet Michael and I have this phrase that we mean it deeply, which is we're just getting started. It's a really fun place to play in the space itself in the industry. This whole notion of sort of connected fitness and what's happened. And you look at a lot of our great partners like Peloton and Zwift and Apple and so forth have come out just recently with really amazing fitness services and so forth that all plug into Strava. That's the beauty of, we like to joke, we're the clubhouse and those are all the workouts. And so we just keep collecting the information coming from all these folks. And so what's exciting for us going forward is that it just helps us think about the services that we can offer in the future to athletes. They'll probably all be digital. There's no reason for us to get into the footwear business or the apparel business, other than maybe the occasional Strava t-shirt, but that's not our DNA. Our DNA is to think about the ways in which we can help people. Say, for instance, you're on Strava and you sign up for one of our challenges. You sign up for your first 10K. We ought to be able to help you train for that more effectively. We don't really do that today. Or you set a goal for the year that you want to run a certain number of miles. How can we help you accomplish that? Or we actually we can help you track your gear. We can see how many miles you put on your shoes today. And we send an email. Like if you say, hey, I want to know when I've reached 300 miles on my shoes, we send an email to people that says, hey, you've hit 300 miles. But what happens is that person then goes to Zappos and buys their shoes, or they go to their local Nike running store to buy them. You shouldn't have to do that. We can make that really easy. If we know exactly what shoe you're wearing and you like it, or we can see what other people are wearing that do the same miles you do. There's all kinds of ways in which we can incorporate sort of high value services into the athlete experience. So for us, it's just staying very focused. We have one customer. It is the athlete. We're not trying to sell advertisements. We're not trying to sell data. We want to sell to our customers. Do you understand? Our business model is a subscription model. So you can use Strava for free, but then if you want to go to the upgraded version of it, really the full Strava version, then you pay us a monthly fee. We're just going to keep doing that.
Fantastic. Kind of stepping back from Strava specifically and looking at your whole career as an entrepreneur and startup founder. Obviously, we have a lot of people on the call today interested in entrepreneurship and startups. What advice would you offer them if you had any key pieces of advice? Obviously, you talked about the sine wave, but beyond that.
Yeah, no. This is when I'm so happy to be here. I mean, first I'm going to tell everybody, it is not that hard Like it's do it, jump in the deep end. I wish in some ways, maybe I wish I'd done it even sooner than I did. And I jumped in when I was about 23, 24. So if you're ready for the ups and downs and just sort of the grind, and it is a grind at times, then there's just nothing better than building something from scratch. So I'll start there. Just so everybody understands the career arc, I have not had a lot of jobs. I left when I graduated. I joined this firm, TA Associates, as I mentioned. I was dialing for deals. This was the early to mid 90s. It was a venture firm where I was calling entrepreneurs all day long, trying to find investment opportunities. And it was a great starting gig because two things happened. One was I really got to talk to entrepreneurs all day long, so I got a good sense of sort of what worked and what didn't. And frankly, I caught the bug to be an entrepreneur. And I got some valuable lessons that, the entrepreneurs taught me one thing. They taught me that whatever you're going to do, you're going to be doing it 365 days a year. You're going to be obsessed by it. You're not going to make a lot of money anytime soon. So make sure you're doing something that you fundamentally enjoy. Pursue things that you're genuinely passionate about. And I think it's important. You can find opportunities in any category. I happen to be interested in sports, but I realize there's lots of people who have interest in lots of different areas. Just start digging there. The other piece of advice I got was actually from the venture guys I worked for, because they were really clever at always making sure that they look for companies that solve fundamental problems. When you're solving a problem as an entrepreneur or as a startup, even if you're tiny, the people who need the problem solved will listen. And that was very true. Like when we launched Kana and customer email, we started talking to companies who had literally tens of thousands of customer emails coming into their environment and had no way of answering them. So that was like a real problem. There was real budget. And once we were able to help them solve that, it didn't matter that we were tiny, people were buying. If you fast forward to Strava, maybe the problem's a little more subtle, but there is kind of this hard thing to stay active. Michael and I always joke that when we launched Strava, we were in our early 40s, we had young families, we had other occupation jobs that were keeping us busy. It was hard to find the time sometimes to just go out and go do a run. And so we wanted to solve the fundamental problem of how to stay motivated. Even when it's cold outside, it's dark, it's raining, how do I get that 20-minute workout in? And what do I do? And so for us, that was solving that problem. So by solving the problem and pursuing the thing you enjoy, it can take you a long ways. That's where I go. I mean, there's all kinds of, we can keep going. I'll give you one other one that always bothers me. I talk to potential entrepreneurs all the time and they'll say to me, well, I think I'd love to do it, but I don't have an idea. Therefore, I just don't think I can start something. My advice to you is you need something, but whatever idea you start with, it's highly unlikely it's going to be the one you end with. So really what you have to do is commit that I'm going to go do something and I believe I've got this idea. And once you have even the kernel of an idea, if you start talking to people and you're objective about it, meaning don't get so married to it that you don't listen. You have to be able to listen because the feedback's really important. But once you have that idea, it leads you to something else. And so let me give you the example. I mentioned to you Kana, the Kana company that we had, Kana Communications, the enterprise software company. So how do we come across this customer email problem? Because we were trying to launch Strava in 1995, we found a website company that built websites solely for the sporting goods industry. And we wanted them to build our website, this virtual locker room. So we started talking to them and said, sure, we can build it. It's going to cost you X. And then the next thing we said to them is, hey, you've got all these other customers, all these sporting good manufacturers that you build websites for. Could you introduce us to them? Because we think that they're going to be the ones who are going to sponsor our website. That's how we're going to make money. So we had this crazy idea. We're going to build this virtual locker room and all these sporting good companies are going to pay to advertise on it. And this is 1995. But these guys said, sure, yeah, we'll introduce you to them. So they introduced us to the likes of Nike and Trek and K2 skis and all these sort of odd brands, Mizuno shoes. And we started talking to them about this virtual locker room idea. And they all said to us, yeah, we just spent $1 million to build our first website. Frankly, we're really kind of stuck because we've spent decades building out our retail channel. It's the retailers that are supposed to interface with the customer, not us. But now we have this problem because everybody's coming directly to Nike.com and they're coming to us and they're trying to ask questions. And we're not really sure we want to sponsor you because we don't necessarily know if we even want customers coming to our website. So I know how crazy this sounds, but you have to remember this is 1995. Like people really weren't sure what this web thing was going to be. So we're listening to them and we're saying, you're kidding me. You've just spent millions of dollars and you don't want customers coming to your website? This makes no sense. And we kept digging in and they kept talking about, well, there's all this customer email and it's a problem. So ironically, we were hearing that. We were kind of hearing that this virtual locker room is going to be really tough to get people to actually upload their activities to. And so we started digging around at like, there's got to be some way to help them solve this customer email problem. Clearly, other technologies have figured this out. And so we started talking to companies out where I live in the Bay Area, companies like Cisco and Oracle and Apple. And it turned out that they had the same problem. None of them had figured out how to answer all these customer emails coming in. And so I won't bore you with how we actually found the idea, but we did find the idea on how to solve for this, and hired some developers and started trying to figure out, okay, maybe we solve for customer email. And that's the journey that I try to remind people. It's like, you have to think of it as a journey rather than like this singular mission. Like if we had been on this almost Don Quixote mission in 1995 to build Strava, I think we would have failed. But instead we were much more on a mission to start something we could build, something we would be proud of. And clearly we did a pretty major pivot or evolution, but it paid off. I can tell you, I mean, Kana went from 2 guys and a dog to 1,200 people. We took it public. We generating hundreds of millions of revenue. I think we had a market cap of 10 billion. I mean, it was a great outcome. But if we'd been married to the original virtual locker room, never would have happened. So, sorry, a long answer to a short question, but jump into the deep end, folks. I tell you what, you can't go study to be an entrepreneur. I will tell you that. You cannot go and take 4 different jobs at companies and become VP of sales and VP of marketing and so forth and somehow think you're going to be an entrepreneur. One thing I learned, probably the best thing I ever did, I studied art history. I had no business starting a software company. I can't write code. I can't market. I can't sell. I can't do anything. But when you realize that, you go hire great people. You go find the people who can do those wonderful things. And as long as you can kind of rally them around the mission and sort of what you're trying to do for your customer, good things happen.
Fantastic. No, that was a great answer. And that just about wraps up all the questions that I have for you. I know there's a lot of people in here who are probably eager to ask you questions, so I'll open the floor to them. If you want to ask a question, just raise your hand and I'll call on you, and feel free to unmute yourself and ask that. So let's start with London.
Hi, I'm London. I'm a senior at the college. I'm curious, in 2018, Strava released like an anonymous data set of all of these different data points where people had run. And it turned out that this revealed some like secretive military sites across the world. How did you deal with that? Like, how did the company deal with the government suddenly being like, oh no, all of these secretive military sites have now been exposed? What was that like on the inside of Strava?
Yeah. No, okay, Lennon, good one. I knew I was going to get hit with something really hard right from the outset. Thanks a lot. Okay, so let's backtrack. Let me give the context for what he's talking about for those of you who may not be familiar. So there's something called the Strava heat map. It's a public display of all the public activities that exist on Strava. You can go see it today. It's pretty cool because you'll see we're in 195 countries, and you can kind of dial in. You can see sort of where people are active. You can see where people have literally gone to the South Pole and things like that. It's been around for years. It actually predates 2018. But what happened in 2018 was that there was a student down in Australia who was studying our heat map. And he was looking at all these really interesting places in the world. And he was trying to figure out, like, why is there all this heat in the middle of nowhere, Afghanistan? Why is there all this heat in the middle of like Timbuktu, Africa? And started to realize, oh, these must be like military installations. And so he published some of this stuff out onto the web, and the press just took off. You know, outing secret military bases. Strava's like doing this. So the backstory on that was that we've also been very careful with Department of Defense, with NATO. If something is on Strava's heat map that shouldn't be there, we make sure it's not there. Like, let's just be clear. Like, we're not out to put anybody at risk, particularly our military. And that had been a long-standing situation. I think the bigger challenge was the way in which the media took off with it was fascinating, and it led to us having to sort of take a deep collective breath. Perfect example, just like that wrongful death lawsuit. And it's like, let's take a deep breath. What is the issue here? We contemplated for a moment. Should we take the heat map down? Do people not understand what it is? Do our own members feel like we're doing something that in any way invades their privacy? And ultimately, we were able to come to a good conclusion, which is you don't take the heat map down, but we need to make sure that we're educating everybody what it is. And also, we need to educate people on the privacy settings so that if you don't want your information contributing to the heat map, we make it really easy. It's just a simple toggle in the app. And so it still exists today. You can go check it out. It's really fun. You can have your personal heat map. If you pay for a subscription, you get a personal heat map that shows you some really cool stuff about your own journey. But yeah, I hate to use this phrase, folks, because of where it comes from, and you're going to hear my political bias here real quick. But fake news, like I can't stand that phrase in the way that it's used in today's sort of world. But I will acknowledge that occasionally you get this stuff that just like takes on a life of its own, and that's a perfect example.
So how did you create that initial connection with the military so that when this issue came up, you knew that it wasn't a real issue, that there wasn't any problem? Did the military reach out to you? Did you reach out to the military? How did that work?
Yeah, no, they had reached out to us at one point. Without sort of going too far, there was, certain aspects of the military reached out to us saying, hey, we're seeing this stuff. And really what it was a longer conversation, because it's not just us ensuring that there isn't something on Strava. We needed to educate them. Like at the end of the day, it's the soldiers who kind of need to be mindful of, you're putting apps on your phone that have geolocation services. Like you've got to think a little bit. Like we all have to partner together. So, because we're not the only app out there that's got geolocation. Almost every app on the planet now has got some element of that. So it was one part us doing what we could to ensure that we were, obeying the law, protecting privacy, protecting their assets, but also then working in concert with them to help educate their members. When's an appropriate time to use it? How do you use it? What do the settings mean? When should they have it turned off completely versus when can they just use it like they would every other citizen? So yeah, it's ongoing conversation.
Fascinating. Thank you.
Yeah.
Awesome. Let's go to Brian.
Thanks, Jack. I think so I'm actually a Strava user myself, and I love the app. When I first was about to download it, I swear I don't see many apps on the App Store that have like 4.8 or higher stars, but it's very clear that the community is something special. And I was just thinking, like, I can imagine the founder journey is a very visceral one. And from my little dips in like running, I can imagine like running experiences and any athletic experience is also a very visceral one. From I guess like being extremely determined when you're, you like sprain an ankle or something, to like not feeling like you can actually do the exercise at hand. I wonder if there are any parallels between like your founder experience and your like rowing experience.
Yeah, Brian, I'm glad you brought it up. And I don't know if I'm going to burst everybody's bubble now or I'm going to make your day. I'm not sure which one, but I'll just give you my truth. My truth is I can't remember any courses that I took at Harvard from 30 years ago. It's like, it is the worst. I can't remember, but I can tell you all these key moments in the boathouse. And Charlie Butt was our coach at the time, who still runs the whole program today, but he was a lightweight coach. The lessons that I got there, the long hours out on the river, the late night sessions in the tanks, the heartache that came from injury and then having to come back, the races up and down the stadium and feeling like there's no way you can do another step and yet somebody's coming after you, so you're going to do it. Just, there were so many things. Fundamentally, what I would tell you is that the concept of teamwork, you heard me joke earlier about how I can't market or sell. I'm not joking. Like I have come to appreciate that the key to success is how you build a team around you and then how you build that chemistry. And that happened in that boathouse. So you're spot on when you talk about just sort of the way in which sports, at least for me, and I think people can find it through other endeavors, but for me, sport was early in my life. I was recruited to Harvard to run. I mean, here's the other great irony. So the running coaches, the track and field and cross country coaches were kind enough to recruit me. I grew up in Reno, Nevada. So I'm recruited out. A kid from Nevada does not come to Harvard. It's like, but I got recruited. Like, okay, I got to try this thing. I'm going to go out there. We'll see. If I don't like it, I'm going back to UNR. But then when I got out there, to get pulled in by the crew coaches in this national championship boathouse and just all the sort of everything that came with that just lived with me. And so I would agree with you 100% that even today, just this, I have what I call the 3 Ps: patience, persistence, and perspective. If you remember anything from this hour, just remember those 3 Ps. And they definitely came out of the boathouse. They definitely came from the years of running and training. And frankly, I'm wearing this cast on my arm right now because I had a bike accident years ago, and I've had 12 surgeries since to try to repair this arm. But I still go ride my bike. Like I hate to admit it, but 2 months from now, once I'm back out, and it's just because I know how much I love it, but I also know that you just kind of persist with the journey. And so the two are they're very similar. Strava's had all kinds of ups and downs, but Michael and I just kind of like, just keep being persistent, maintain perspective. Let's come home and, don't lose sleep over what happened today. There's another day tomorrow. And it's pretty amazing what happens if you just keep that mindset.
Thank you. That's great.
Yeah.
Great. Next, we'll go to Acer.
Hi there. So I'm Acer. I run for the Harvard cross country team. And yeah, so it's kind of great hearing the origin story, of Strava, because last spring when everyone was, moving off of campus, one of the things that the team was looking for was that, virtual locker room type idea. And yeah, Strava is, what we turn to kind of stay connected and keep supporting each other through our training. So yeah, that's just a great little kind of story. That's pretty cool. But yeah, so one of my favorite features with Strava is the flyby map.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and so I was looking into it a little bit, and from what I understand, that kind of came from like a jam session or something like that. So I guess if you could talk about kind of having corporate culture where you have creativity and collaboration across all different departments and stuff like that to keep ideas fresh. I don't know, how does that get started, and how do you keep that going?
Yeah. So Acer, thanks for being a member, Brian, yourself, and I feel for you guys. I know with this cross country season and so forth, and not being able to compete. So hopefully we get you joining a couple of challenges and things like that and enjoying it. Flybys, for those of you who don't know, and unfortunately, I'm going to give you some bad news if you haven't seen it lately, but we just had to make a change to flybys. So flybys has historically been something that was created during a jam project. We do jams once a quarter. We take basically a week off, and we allow everybody in the company to work on a project that they're passionate about, as it relates to sort of the Strava experience. And people actually compete to try to get other people into jams with them. And so one of the ones that came out a number of years ago was flybys, which was a really creative way of, when you go and do a workout somewhere, you can click on flybys, and in that moment, you can see all the other people on Strava who are active in that same area. So it's really fun, particularly if you're in like a group or something, or if you're in a race, you could literally sort of see what the flyby. I've got a good friend of mine who he actually competes. He races kiteboards. And so it's this amazing way to use flybys to actually watch a kiteboard race and sort of see where the strategies are. So the bad news I was going to mention was, this is a good example where we really started looking into privacy in flybys and really thinking through the use cases. And while we haven't had any bad situations yet, we started realizing you get one bad actor out there who takes advantage of flybys and starts trying to figure out what people are doing around them. That's not cool. And so all we didn't get rid of it, but we just simply made it, you have to opt in. So it's going to take some time to build back up the population who's comfortable with it. And you can decide what you want on flybys or not, because you can always make an activity private or public. But so that's flybys. Jams, I think you're right. It's a huge part of our culture. Acer, it's been, we're always trying to look for a way in which we both have very specific product initiatives that we're trying to hit every quarter, or what we call every season. We have 2 seasons a year. But we also realize that there's so many things that we'd like to fix, and giving people sort of an intense week to go in and fix that bug that's just been really bothering them, or adding something. Like we had a group of summer interns this past summer. They were all with us virtually, but they all got together and virtually did some awesome jams around gear tracking and how to bring gear tracking to mobile and so forth. And now we're trying to figure out how to bring that into the actual public app. That's the one challenge. We'd see a lot of great jams, but there's a pretty major step that happens between something you jam on for 3 days and then how you bring it into an existing commercial app in a way that we think through all the use cases and so forth. But culturally, it's a huge part of, I mean, everybody looks forward to it every quarter.
Great. Next, we'll go to Clara.
Hi, thank you so much for coming. I am also a huge Strava fan. I'm also on the lightweight rowing team here, so I've been using that a lot for cross training since our seasons have been canceled. It's been a good way to stay in touch with teammates. I think one of the questions that I have is how you've navigated your partnerships with cities and like how you've kind of gone the balance of like data privacy, but also kind of prioritizing the athlete interest. Like I think that what I've read about has been really cool, like trying to like get cities to build more bike infrastructure, for example. But I'm curious how that like balance has been navigated.
Yeah. So go lightweights. It's great. So so a quick step back. So Claire's referring to something called Strava Metro. It's a service that we offer where we partner with city planners, local governments around the world to really help them rethink their urban infrastructure when it comes to bicycle pathways, pedestrian pathways, and so forth. It was something that came up about 4 years ago when we had actually one of our Strava members up in the state of Oregon happened to work for the Department of Transportation up there and started to realize that we probably had some really important information that could help them make better informed decisions relative to just how to make their intersections more safe in Portland and other areas. And so we started looking at the data and realizing, sure enough, we actually have in these major urban areas, we have enough of the population now where it's significantly or statistically significant. Like we can definitely sort of have an impact. And so we started partnering with these cities and states to just give them insight into the data, points of origin, point of destination, how do people move? And you start to realize very quickly, things change. Like if it's a weekday during commute in London, that's very different from a Saturday afternoon. And so how can they begin to think about it? Because it's a real problem in these major cities. It's the fact of the matter, like if you take London as an example, they're predicting that by 2024, they've run out of seats in public transportation, and they can't fit more cars onto their streets. So they know they have to shift behavior. And this is just one way to give them better insight. The way that we ensure privacy is, one, again, make sure we always give our athletes the option. So there's quick opt-in or opt-out for Metro. So you don't have to have your information in there. Second is, it's all anonymized data. You can't determine any single person's ride on Metro. It's anonymized. I won't go through the technical details, but there's a way in which the team basically takes 5 activities at a time from 5 different individuals. It just gets aggregated and anonymized. So it's basically de-individualized, I think is the word they use. And so in doing, we feel really good about sort of just the aggregate data as what they need in keeping our athletes safe. And yeah, it's something, we got so excited about it that just 3 weeks ago, we announced it's now a free service. We used to charge for it and we realized it's just too important. It was never going to be a big money maker. And so instead we've just turned it into a free service for any qualified partner in the world who's trying to do great work when it comes to infrastructure. And yeah, we're really excited to see what's going to happen. We could give you, I tell you, what gets fun, folks, and this is the beauty, again, like I said earlier, whatever idea you start with, it's not where you're going to end. I can give you stories over and over. I'll give you 2 that are really fascinating. So, because we're just talking about urban infrastructure, we had a university just 2 years ago who started studying the way in which athletes move through national parks. And by doing so, they're now able to work with all of the wildfire management organizations to better figure out how to move firefighters into these dense forest areas and help them move more quickly, because they're basically extrapolating the speed at which runners and bikers and so forth can move through these same areas. If you live out in the Western United States, this is a massive problem that we've got to solve for. So they're using Strava data to basically do more effective wildfire management. We had another one where people were looking at the way in which people run along the beach, right? Because we all, as human beings, we look to go to the edge, right where the line of the water comes up, right where the sand's going to be nice and hard. Well, it turns out when you study that year after year after year, you can begin to understand rising seas and what's happening with climate change. So in a million years, when Michael and I started this, we never thought that by basically creating this virtual locker room and just bringing athletes together for fun, we could start to have impact on climate change and so forth. But that's what you can do. And that's why I say we're just getting started, and why I really want to encourage all of you, if you've got any kind of an inkling of an idea, just keep scratching at it, keep going, because you never know where it's going to take you.
Awesome. Next up, we have Luca.
Hey, Mr. Gainey. I just want to say I love the Strava platform. I row on the heavyweight team here at UPenn, and the entire team's on it. We love using the service. My question is kind of like, in this hectic time, a lot of companies have kind of been killed by COVID, but I'm kind of curious, how has Strava been doing compared to like normal times? Have you guys been doing better or worse with COVID?
Yeah. Hi, Luca. So I'm sorry your pen is a rower. We'll excuse that today, but everything else is great. Yeah, it's a great question. You know, we're the first to acknowledge we were very fortunate. Michael likes to refer, we're always using sports metaphors all the time. And Michael's metaphor the other day is like, we just happened to have the sails up at the right time that the wind started blowing with COVID, because what happened was when people were forced, basically they were forced home. They no longer had commutes. All of a sudden you can't drive, you can't go out anywhere. People started working out. People started just being active. And so we saw a big uptick in what we call top of the funnel. Basically, we saw a lot of people joining Strava, and a healthy join. Contrasted to the heat map thing, we saw all these people join Strava because it's like, what's this heat map thing? And so they all joined, but they didn't want to be active. They were seeing this fake news out there. During COVID, we're seeing people really fundamentally change their lifestyle. We're seeing people realize that maybe it is important for me to maintain my health and stay fit. I don't have to commute to work every day. I don't have to spend an hour in my car, or 2 hours in my car every day. I can use that time to maybe go for a run. So we've clearly benefited from that. And it's something we want to just keep encouraging. Again, because our thesis is it is a good thing. This isn't, they're not spending more time addicted to a screen. We've got a stat that we love to track, which is total minutes working out versus every minute in the app. Right now, we're about 50-to-1 ratio. So for every 1 minute in your app, you spend 50 minutes working out. And the really good news is we're seeing that actually get greater and greater. We're seeing that 50 rise. So our mission is get you out, get you doing something. Doesn't matter what it is. Go walk for the dog, but it's amazing what happens when you do that.
Awesome. Up next, we have Deborah.
Yep.
Oh, I think you're still muted.
Old person problems. Strava, kudos to Jack, and real kudos to Jack for having this. And I encourage you to have this video somehow on Strava, because I think it's just so interesting. It's really something that we all seek. I use Strava even today. I just love it. I'm Luca's mom. I just really upticked my Strava usage over COVID particularly. And it's been a platform to meet friends that I never would have cycled with today had I not met them. And I felt very comfortable, sort of can look them up and such. And from a safety standpoint, I've chosen to shorten or change my name a little bit, but I noticed that you don't quite start us from our homes and don't quite end us there as well. And I wonder if you can speak to that. And sometimes I just purposely don't start my Strava at home. I go sort of up the hill, and then I start it with intention to keep a safety parameter. I just wanted to know what your safety parameters are and what your intentions have been with that.
Yeah, Deborah, it's a great question. Well, thank you and welcome. It's poor Luca's been called out. Let's see now, Lucas, he's gone non-video now. You've really done it to him. So I have two boys that are freshmen in college right now, and it's one of the best things. Is anything I can do to sort of do that. So it's a great question around privacy. And you're touching on something that's really important. So one of the things we think about is privacy during activity. And you're talking about, we call them, I believe we call them safety zones today, or sort of free zones, where you can really get very granular. You can go to our website and into your profile, and you can decide, do I want a half-mile zone around my house? Do I want a mile zone around my house? And then we just ensure that whenever you get close to that, we kind of geo-fence it, and people just can't see where you go from there. And so that's one element that we do. We also just make sure if there's just an activity that you do in an area, either because it's time of day or because of where you are, and you just want it private, any activity, you can just rock it up and you'll have full access to it, but nobody else can see it. So we try to think about that. And there's lots of other little features that we try to think about around privacy. As I mentioned to you, like flybys, some things now we're making opt-in only just to ensure that it's there. So the thesis around it is put control in the hands of our athletes. We want to make sure that you feel like you have the options, because there are times when people want to share. That's the thing that's really tricky, is if we make it too one-sided, you lose sort of the benefit. We have this thesis that people keep people active. And so it is important to, like you said, like being able to find other people who are kind of at your pace or your speed, or enjoy the kinds of workouts that you do. And if you can find them, that's what kept Michael and I going. It's why we wanted Strava. It was like, how do we reconnect with each other so we can do it? So we want to give the tools so that you can collaborate. Yet when you have this global population, you have to realize, who is your group? How do we ensure that and that's where we're actually excited about our future inside Strava. We're spending a lot of time thinking about small group activity and what are the tools you need to organize, and so that you can kind of have your own Strava within the platform rather than just always being part of this global community. So sorry, long answer to your question, but lots of thinking going into just what that experience should feel like for you when private versus public.
Thank you.
Yeah. Great. Do we have any more questions from the audience? If not, just one. Aiden.
Hello, I'm a freshman at Bates. I'm skiing and rowing. Will there be a feature later on that'll help incorporate other sports into clubs? So like all the clubs that I've been a part of, they only count the times for running or biking or swimming. And that seems to be a deficit in that feature, where a lot of the time those aren't the main activities of some clubs. So will there be an opportunity to kind of change that to incorporate like skiing or other similar activities?
Yeah. Okay. So first off, Aiden, before I answer your question, this is now where I get to basically totally embarrass my own son. So he's in your class. He's a freshman at Bates. So you got to go look up Charlie Gainey, and you got to give him grief, because if you're on this thing, why isn't he on this thing right now? So that's the first thing. You're going to have to basically track him down and say, dude, I just listened to your dad go on and on and on for an hour. You should have been there. So do me a favor and do that. Second thing, you're spot on. When I mentioned to you, we're really getting focused on small groups and kind of club intimacy. You're hitting on a bug today. It's technically it's not a bug, but it's a bad feature, where because we started in running and cycling, we have still this kind of this heritage, this history that we're still trying to fix, so that we can ensure that whether it's in a club, whether it's a competition, whether it's a leaderboard, it should show up for any of the activities that we have. And we're getting there. You should have it here in the next few months, but we're trying to just do it in a seamless way. But no, totally agree with you. We want to ensure our challenges, it's been hard to keep up with the activities. It's really fascinating. If I told you the number of activities right now that we don't do, that we're getting like serious requests, it's really fascinating to see what the world does every day. It's amazing how creative people can be with their outdoor outlets, so to speak. So.
Awesome. And we have one last question here from Jack Lee. As a non-technical founder, how did you go about finding technical teammates / what was your initial value add? So just something you spoke to earlier.
Well, I can answer the first one for sure. And the second one, that's a great question. People are probably still asking. The way you find technical founders or technical partners in this is you beg, borrow, and steal. Like it's not rocket science. You prepare to pay for a lot of pizza. You just go. And so I'll give you some stories. And so when we started Kana, I mentioned to you that we were talking to all these companies that had a problem, but we couldn't find the solution. And where I found the solution was actually, I sat down with a 16-year-old kid who was doing part-time customer email response for a gaming company in Silicon Valley. We sat down at a local Subway restaurant, and he turned over the little paper placemat that was there, and he described how he had hacked basically a software program that would allow inbound email to create a response more quickly. So it was a 16-year-old hacker who was my first developer. Like, this is awesome. How can we work with you? And then I found somebody who was basically a FileMaker Pro consultant, which was the first database we tried to use. And you just kind of pick and steal. I live near Stanford University, so then what we figured out was students, we could basically go into like the computer science classes. We'd get to know the teachers, and Michael and I would just get, my partner Michael, he's the smart one here. He went off, got his PhD in economics after graduating from Harvard in economics, and he was teaching at Stanford. So we had access into the university. So we were just borrowing and stealing students like yourselves all the time to come over and work, again, for free food or, you know, whatever it was. And that's where our first key hires were made. I can still tell you, Mark Shaw, Chris Donahue, these were guys that I hired in 1997 when they graduated from Stanford. Mark Shaw, you fast forward now, 15, 20 years later, he was our chief technical officer at Strava for 10 years. He just left us to kind of just go, he's kind of retired at this point. But that's the kind of friendships that develop, and you just pick and borrow where you could. In terms of my value add, you might be able to pick it up in this hour. Part of it is just, hey, what do I need to do? If I need to sweep the floors, I'll sweep the floors. If I need to go and find food that night, I'll do that. You got to kind of realize that this only works if you're willing to do it together. It's not any fun to do it by yourself. It's why I even found my co-founders can be hard. I'll be the first to acknowledge there's a lot of difficult stories out there around co-founding teams that haven't worked, but it's also, entrepreneurship can be lonely. And so in my case, I was very fortunate. Michael was there. He was somebody, we had this friendship already, and we've made it work. We've, 30 years now, we've been together, and I once you acknowledge that it takes a team to pull any of these things off, then I realized my value is just, I'll be the glue. I'll help sort of bring people together in different scenarios and ensure that they have the resources that they need. That's probably the other thing I do. I just make sure we've got what we need, whether it's the capital to keep growing the business, whether it's recruiting another person that we need in. You tell me what you need and I'll go find it.
Great. Well, thank you so much for joining us tonight, Mark. It was really fantastic having you here. Everyone else, thanks for coming. That's going to do it for this fireside chat, and have a good night.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks for being Strava members. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you so much.
Oh my God, that was so good.
So good. He's so good.
That
So
was
cool.
so good.
He's so cool.
Also, Luca's mom. Oh my God, it's so funny.
Yeah. So Luca is
so
one of my friends
good.
from high school who really